Ever heard of Rule Zero? The rules are not in charge of your tabletop role-playing game. The GM is. Hey there, adventurers. I'm Judd. Welcome to Short Rest Studios, where we believe fun builds community. I would love for you to be part of this community. So please, if you get something out of this video, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and check out the membership levels in the Adventurers Guild on Patreon. I'll drop that link in the description. Today, I'm here to tell you, no, your game master is not cheating. Well, most likely. Stick around because at the end, I'm going to tell you how to know if a GM or you, if you're running the game, is engaging in cheating behavior. And hang around for a message from today's sponsor, Homie and the Dudes, The Wandering Tavern. A while back, I posted this meme to my socials. I didn't make it, I just thought it was funny. I got this comment over on TikTok. So the DM is cheating. Got it. And you can see my response there. That's not cheating. This got me thinking about the idea of a game master cheating. Some people believe the DM, GM, keeper, judge, whatever your game of choice calls the person who presides over your game, cannot cheat. Here's the thing. I don't agree with that sentiment, but I also don't think you really need to worry about the GM cheating at your table. Here's where most people go wrong. They don't really read the rules. Most of the Dungeons & Dragons players' handbooks in the wild belong to dungeon masters, and the same is true of every other RPG rulebook from Dungeon Crawl Classics to ShadowDark to Pathfinder. And the players who have read the player rules have probably never read those rules that are specific to the game master. And why would they? If you're one of those players, this next part is probably going to surprise you. Remember that Rule Zero I mentioned at the top of the video? Nearly every set of Game Master rules states it in one form or another. Let me give you some examples. In the foreword of the D&D Basic Rulebook, first published in 1981, a year that, yes, actually existed, some of us remember it, Tom Moldvay writes, "In a sense, the D&D game has no rules, only rule suggestions. No rule is inviolate, particularly if a new or altered rule will encourage creativity and imagination." He does say, in a sense, so maybe that's not enough for you. How about this line from the foreword of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition Dungeon Master Guide written by Zeb Cook? "The rules are only guidelines." That seems pretty in your face. He also quotes Spider-Man, which I love. Check out this excerpt from page 4 of the 2014 D&D DMG. "The D&D rules help you and the other players have a good time, but the rules aren't in charge. You're the DM and you are in charge of the game." Okay, that's Dungeons & Dragons. What about other games? The Dungeon Crawl Classics core rulebook. "The judge is always right. Let the rules bend to you, not the other way around." My favorite is from ShadowDark RPG. "The only rule is that you make the rules. What's written in this book is a guide, not a constraint, and none of it takes precedence over your judgment. If something doesn't work at your table, change it or throw it out and don't look back." Players, if your GM is changing rules, if they're changing monster stat blocks, if they're interpreting a rule differently from what you or another GM may think, or even if they're fudging dice rolls, they're not cheating. In fact, a good GM does these things all the time for very good reason, and that reason is stated exceptionally well in the 2024 D&D Dungeon Master's Guide. The most important part of being a good DM is facilitating the fun of everyone at the table. What's more fun than an inspired new game setting? Enter the Wandering Tavern, a sprawling 180-plus page system-agnostic, Studio Ghibli-inspired floating city created by today's sponsor, the father-son team of Homie and the Dude. You'll get optional D&D 5e stats, expansive battle maps filled with key locations, a wide range of unique NPCs, and incredible magic items to protect yourself from the twisted spirits that stalk the halls. With plot hooks that lead to dark, forgotten secrets, black market empires, forbidden love, and twisted histories, there's no end to the tales you can tell with the Wandering Tavern. Grab the link in the description and use code SHORTREST to get 10% off your order. 99.9% of the time, neither players nor GMs are cheating. Generally, we're all at the table to have fun. Sometimes we make mistakes, sometimes we forget things. But on extremely rare occasions, a GM may cheat by not keeping to the spirit of the game. Here are 3 ways you can know if that's happening. First, if your GM changes the rules without telling you, you could call that cheating. There are exceptions, like the example in my Darth Vader meme. Changing a monster stat block, reskinning a monster, or adjusting it in some way is actually something we're specifically encouraged to do. If your GM is mixing up the monsters a bit, making trolls vulnerable to cold instead of fire, for example, they're doing it to challenge and surprise you, to make it fun for you. They might also be doing it to keep that one player from metagaming, which is what's happening in that meme. Second, if your GM is your adversary, you could call that cheating. The 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide says this: it's not a competition. The DM isn't competing against the other players. It's your job to provide fun challenges and keep the story moving. And check out page 104 of the Dragonbane rulebook. As GM, it can be tempting to think you are playing against the players, but it is important to remember that you are all playing to have fun together. And this sentiment from the Call of Cthulhu Keeper rulebook is one that's repeated in every TTRPG I've read. You have the responsibility for preparing and running the scenario without bias. If the GM is treating the players like opponents, there's definitely bias there. And wielding the in-game power of the GM with bias will make the game inherently unfair. And that leads me to the third way you can know if your GM is not on the up and up. If your GM isn't adjudicating the rules consistently, you could call that cheating. If they apply certain rules differently in different situations, especially if those situations are similar, if they allow one player to attempt something they won't allow another player to do that should be within their character's abilities, that's not good. If one player consistently gets the spotlight at the expense of other players, well, that might be an issue with the player, but the GM also has a responsibility to deal with it somehow and to not just let it keep happening. These are not, by any means, all the things a GM can do wrong or unfairly in a game. If you have some other thoughts, drop those in the comments, but please keep it civil. Now, before we finish, here's one last thing to keep in mind. Fun builds community. The ultimate goal of tabletop role-playing games is to have fun with friends and family and build relationships through that fun. Give your GM and the other players at your table the benefit of the doubt. If your GM made an inconsistent ruling, it was probably a mistake, or maybe they had a reason that made sense that you missed. Honestly, the likelihood that they're cheating, that any player at your table is cheating, is really small. I'm a firm believer that the majority of people at a game table want everyone to have fun, but sometimes we do have to deal with difficult personalities. Check out this next video for some tips on spotting the toxic player at your table, and I'll see you next time on Short Rest Studios.